Hello, Team BaseCamp, and hey, welcome to today's review of lower cadence tempo, high cadence surges. What a great workout. I had so much fun today. It was great always having all the coaches on and all that great feedback. I love to paint and I love talking about the fire element. That was all fun. So thanks for making it so energized. We're going to take a look at Lynn's workout because her workout shows all the great stuff that we were working on today. We can see she's turning it green. She got her strength work done already. Awesome job, Lynn. You're really crushing it. I'm going to click in. Now, as we click in, I'm going to take a quick review. Her target was 1 hour. She was right on. We were targeting training stress score of 55, and she actually got 66. Now, we talked about this in Tuesday's workout. That means she must have done something. How do we know where the extra TSS came from? Well, the time is generally the same, but let's look at, remember, IF, intensity factor. If she went as hard as she could go for an hour, that would be a 1.0. This workout was scheduled at 0.74. She went 0.8, so a little harder. Not dramatically, and we'll talk about that when we dive in. So for me as a coach, I look at this very quickly with my athletes. I would look, if I was coaching you with Lynn, I'd be like, oh, she had a good hour, went a little bit harder. And then I have to ask, was that a good little bit harder or maybe not such a good little bit harder? Because in my group, we talked about control was the goal. So let's drill in and take a look. Now, one of the things that's awesome, and I kind of enjoy that, and you're all going to following along, we're going to move more and more away from erg mode, because erg mode really only teaches us to resist a certain amount of pressure. It doesn't teach us how to make power. And we're going to move to incline mode, where we need to use our gears and our ability to control cadence and force to make power. That's more real world. And you could immediately see, as you start seeing these incline files, they look more like outdoor riding. This is, in physiological terms, greater specificity. Specificity is one of the key important physiological principles in training we want to observe, and we're doing that here. Now, let's dig in. We can see she nailed the workout, so I'm going to leave it. Let's look at the other significant part of this workout. This workout, tempo is still an aerobic effort. Yes, you are burning more carbs as you get into tempo. As you start getting into around 80, 85%, you start burning a significant 80 to 85% of your FTP. You start burning a significant more amount of carbs, actually. Now, when we burn those carbs, we're also producing byproducts. And the two simplest ones to think about are lactate and CO2. So tempo work is still aerobic. It's still driving towards improving our aerobic capacity, but in a more intensive fashion. Excuse me. And it's adding the element of a greater neuromuscular demand, a greater force demand. So that helps improve our fatigue resistance and muscular endurance. And these byproducts, right? It begins to help our body, that aerobic engine, learn to deal with that byproduct or those byproducts and more and others. And the little surges, well, that kind of supercharges that effort to deal with those byproducts. Very simple. We'll get deeper into this in cycle 2 and 3. Now, we can see this was low cadence. She dropped her cadence down to around 70. It was a little up and down, but pretty good control. We were in incline mode. So she had to use her gears and make this work happen. Meaning I had to shift. We were shifting into 2 easier gears each banner when we did the high cadence surge. So instead of just forcing up to high cadence, just grind, we just shifted. We used the biomechanical advantage of a bicycle. Gears. And then when we went down after the high cadence and dropped down, we shifted into 2 harder gears, maybe 3, depends on your bike, right? And again, we used the biomechanical efficiency of the bicycle to make the effort easier for us. That means less fuel, less fatigue, less RPE, better performance. So we really leaned into this concept of that biomechanical efficiency, particularly as we prepared to go metric century this weekend. And we did a lot of great learning on that. Now, when I look at this, this was basically, her warm-up was a little harder for her as she was figuring out incline. She settled in nicely. Now, tempo is what we typically refer to as zone 3. So, and aerobic endurance is zone 2, but a good way you can see this, if you hover over watts, see it says show zones, you can turn on a zone view. So there's zone 3. You can see my little cursor. Actually, if you look in the lower right there of the graph, I can't use the pointer or it'll go away. You can see what her zone 3 is. And I can scan through this and see she did a pretty good job. She didn't stay in zone 3. And I, just because I've seen this a lot, I can see it was a little bit high most of the time, which is fine. She was feeling good. Actually, she has some fitness coming on. I can already see it in her system. So she had a great workout. So I'm going to hide those zones now. There's a great little trick for you to get a quick visual. Was I in the right zones or not? Now, what I really like from Lynn here, we practice the element of fire. Go too hard, right? Fire energizes, it fuels our success and our performance. But if we use too much of it, we burn too brightly, we burn up. She did a really good job. We go to tempo and incline. You can see her cadence was a little high and so was her power. She starts to settle in, but she's high here. Too much fire. She's burning it up. Does the first cadence spin, kind of gets it. Settles better in here. You can see she's really starting to connect. She's finding those good rhythms. You notice how the tempo, each 5-minute, 4.5-minute block gets better and more controlled. As human beings, that's how we learn. We iterate to learning, one little step at a time, one bite at a time, one chunk at a time, until we master a skill. It's how we program our brains. Her high cadence is awesome, but you can see early on here, there's different variances between her actual power and her cadence. And look how her power's way up and cadence is lower. She's trying to find that right blend. She's playing with the gears to feel the relationship. Remember, a watt is how fast you pedal times how hard you pedal. And as we're using gears, she's finding that relationship. And what rocks? Look at the final surge. The final 2 actually are so good here. She crushed it. Lynn, you were awesome. Her cadence average up here was like about 110. I forget, I dragged over it, which is awesome. You can see her best overall average cadence. You can see how flat and controlled that is. And her power was controlled. She didn't go power crazy. She didn't burn that huge mat. She didn't use too much fire. So she stayed economical. This is part of the purpose of what we were training today. How to, like if you're doing your challenge on the weekend and you get dropped off the back, how to use your gears and your biomechanical efficiency and don't use too much power and get back in the group. Now, let's go over here in the right panel and again review training stress score. Remember, just like IF, let's start with IF actually. The IF was 0.80, so a little harder than we were expecting. And you can see, I can visually see, when we went to the endurance, we were chatting and having fun. And I asked everybody to keep their cadence a little higher. She kind of lost focus a little and went too hard there. A lot of her TSS was picked up there, and she was kind of strong throughout the whole day. So that's okay. This was supposed to be 0.76. She went 0.80. That's okay. I wouldn't have gone any harder. We don't want to push too hard at this stage. We're just doing aerobic work, but her fitness is coming, so it just worked for her. Remember, 1.0 would be as hard as she can go for an hour. So at 0.8, she went a pretty good chunk of as hard as she could go for an hour, right? That generated 66 TSS points. Her training stress score was 66. So when I taught this on Friday, most of you were in a low 50. This one's more. This is why it's intensive aerobic. And what I preached or taught to my group was tempo was actually really good training. It's a great because it's race pace specific, but it's more fatiguing because it's harder and you got to be careful about using it too much or going too hard. So if you compare the training stress score of this, because you had an hour workout on Tuesday and an hour workout here, this one's about 10 to maybe, well, about 8, depends on your FTP and what you were doing. Let's say between 8 and 15 points higher. So you went harder today. Now, I'll also tell you your kilocalories, you burned more energy in today's effort. So you had more kilocalorie output or work, physiologically speaking. And I should point it out here, work. Your work was a little higher. You burned more fuel today. So if you noticed your hexis looking for a little higher calorie, a little higher carb today, it saw that the workout was harder than the Tuesday workout, and it was trying to fuel you correctly. Now that we understand, we're just going to start getting deeper into the more technical terms of what's happening here. IF of a 0.8, when she, remember, max is 1.0 per the hardest hour, went hard as you could for an hour. And TSS was 66. Remember, 100 points. If you go as hard as you can for an hour, you would get an IF of 1.0 and 100 points. She got 66. So this was a pretty hard workout hour. I will tell you right now, anytime you start getting over about 55 points an hour, you're generating some real fatigue. So you need good recovery. You need to get back into it. Finally, in closing, one of the things I want to start looking at is time and zones. Lynn, you had some strangeness in your zones. You had set your FTP correctly, but you didn't complete the calculation step. So I did them for you. Sorry, I just fixed it. And now you will probably notice that these power by zone charts will look more accurate. And it was just you didn't push the final calculate and apply button. Now we can look at this workout, understand why the TSS was higher. Just look at power by zones. And you can see she spent 21 minutes in zone 2 and almost 30 minutes in zone 3 and 6 minutes in zone 4. The surges were zone 4. So we get an understanding of time in zone. You'll see us call this TIZ, time in zone. Time in zone gives us an understanding of the effort. Like, okay, we know she had a higher TSS. We know she had a higher IF. What was really driving it? Well, we're seeing in this case, higher zones, higher intensity. And then it's that intensity which we know is driving. Why? Because the IF was higher. Pretty simple, pretty complex, all at the same time. I'm going to start putting out a nerdcast on these metrics next week, one at a time. That'll make it simple. Thanks, everybody, for a great workout. I will talk to you soon.